I'm the community champion for the Palliative Care Institute. I love that title. So the Palliative Care Institute is a fairly new initiative at Western Washington University, and we see. Pardon me?
You have a mic.
She's got the mic. I will just talk louder. We seek to improve care for all those with serious illness or terminal illness by mounting projects in collaboration with other partners focused on provider training and community education, and particularly community activation, so that we can be better prepared to make the decisions we want to be making about our own care at the end of life and the care for those that we love. So if you want more information about the Institute itself or any of the other events we put on, there's a little flyer out on the table that has a lot of useful links on it, including the link to our main page. And the main page has an event tab, and you can see all the things coming up. For example, we're co-sponsoring with the Peace Health Hospital and some other folks a presentation by Barak Gaster in January. He's a physician from the UW who's been thinking a lot about dementia care and how to plan better for dementia care. So if that's of concern to you, you might want to look at the community education page for that. We have a conference coming up in the spring that you're all invited to come to on palliative care, treating the whole person. So how can we not only look at the medical care we might need to receive, but also all our other emotional, spiritual, psychological needs that we also have. So I encourage you to go look at the event page. There are a lot of other things on here too. I also need to give a great big thanks to our partners for this evening. So Fairhaven College gave us the space. Helped financially. So we are thrilled about that. And I'm so happy that the Sustainable Action Fund also agreed to fund this project, because they, like me, consider this a zero waste question. How can we actually do things at the end of our life that actually have a positive ecological impact? So thank you to the Sustainable Action Fund and to all the students who pay the fees that go to fund those projects. And any of you in the audience who have been supporters of the Palliative Care Institute in the past, your money also goes to help fund these community conversation series. Thank you so much for your donations. If you've never donated and you want to, there are little donation envelopes out on the table as well. So now to the main event. So Katrina Spade is the founder and executive director of Recompose, which was formerly called the Urban Death Project. It's a new system for gently and sustainably disposing of the dead using the process of composting. Katrina has a Master's of Architecture from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and although architecture may seem like an odd degree for someone working for solutions on what to do with your body after you die, Katrina has focused her entire design career on creating human-centered architectural solutions to many of our ecological problems. And as Katrina will show us tonight, current practices for body dispositions have significant ecological impacts that are not very good for the planet. In 2014, Katrina was named a Climate Fellow by Echoing Green, which is a program to ignite the power of social entrepreneurs to face the world's most pressing challenges, including climate change and sustainable development. So we're really happy that that project recognized her work. Katrina is considered a thought leader in the field of alternative death care, and her work with Recompose has been featured in The Atlantic, Fast Company, Wired, NPR, the New York Times, TED. Wow. So we're so pleased that she came to share the work of Recompose with us tonight. Katrina.
Thank you. Let's see. That's good. First, we're going to test out mics. Hello?
Can you hear?
Yeah, can you hear me back there? Will you, if at any point you can't hear me, just say something or like wave? Yeah, because I don't want you to have to be straining. You want it up? All right. Let's see. Is that better? Doesn't seem better.
Just get it to point.
Please pause.
If I put it through here, maybe it will stay pointing up. And which one's the?
This is this one. Yeah.
Is there a volume on here? Is this little button right here?
I'm assuming that the volume might be connected to the speaker. Like, is there a volume switch on the speaker?
The speaker somewhere else? Oh, that's better, isn't it? Okay, but if it slips, like it's fine to interrupt, because let's be comfortable in your comfortable chairs. Yeah, so thank you for that really lovely introduction, and thank you for having me. And thanks all for being here on this like drizzly, cold-ish Tuesday night when it feels like 10 p.m. because it's so dark. I live in Seattle. I drove up this afternoon, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit about what the heck I'm up to and where we've been and where we're going, and I promise to leave plenty of time for questions. But before I start, I always forget to do this, but if you'll bear with me, sometimes it's nice to start a talk like this. If all of us who have them, and I think most of us probably do, invite our dead people into the room with us, if they want to come. Like, they don't have to be here, but, and just, as a practice, kind of, I like to think about my people around me. So if you all want to take a minute to do that now, that would be awesome. Hello, there's so many more of you now. So Recompose was founded in 2017, but actually my work began before that in grad school as a thesis project and as part of the Urban Death Project, which was a 501c3, which I founded in 2014. Our mission is to create an ecological, participatory, and meaningful death care option. And not to be go all hyperbole, but we actually think we can change the world by doing this. So that's our long-term goal. I imagine many of you in this room already know some of the problems with our current funeral industry. I could go on at length about the interesting sort of history and business case. So if that's somewhere we want to go after with questions, we can do so. But I was struck several years ago in graduate school by the fact that when I died, there were really two available options for me, for my body when I died: cremation and conventional burial. And both of those, it's not surprising to hear, have quite an ecological impact. So I'll start with conventional burial. In the US and Canada only, which I think is an interesting asterisk, conventional burial includes the embalming of the body, typically, which is where it is filled with a formaldehyde-laden embalming fluid, and then the burial in a cemetery with a casket, often made of hardwood or metal, concrete grave liner typically, and then a headstone, and then all the upkeep of that cemetery, all of the transportation and manufacture of all of those pieces and parts and products add to the carbon footprint of conventional burial. You know what, before we keep going though, I'm going to say that while the environmental footprint is very important to probably most of us in this room, the most important thing I think we can have when it comes to our death care options is meaning. So if conventional burial with embalming and casketing and concrete grave liner and headstone is meaningful for you or some of your family members, I 100% think we should have it. But for so many of us, that has lacked meaning for a long time. So cremation rates are rising really quickly, in part because people are finding less meaning in conventional burial. Seattle's cremation rate is somewhere around 95%. Washington State has, I think, the highest in the country, or thereabouts, with 70% statewide. Perhaps not surprisingly, the coastal cities and urban areas have much higher cremation rates than more rural areas. And of last year, cremation became the more popular of the two nationwide. So it's on a trajectory to be somewhere like 70% by 2030. I just totally made up those numbers, so do not go beyond that. But cremation rates are rising fast. And I would venture to say it's really become a default. People are, by and large, not choosing cremation because fire is particularly meaningful. I think for the most part, it's a disinterest in conventional burial that's driving people to choose cremation. But what's been interesting since the 60s, when modern cremation in the US really became a thing, is that I think in general people say it's a little more environmentally friendly, I think. But the reality is that the carbon footprint for conventional burial and cremation are just about the same. Cremation takes natural gas, it emits particulates and mercury and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. For those of you who are interested in metric tons and pounds and carbon footprint specifics, we have around 600 million pounds of carbon dioxide emitted annually from cremations. And you can imagine that's only going to grow as our aging population does. So it's a significant problem. We're probably not going to solve climate change by not cremating. So again, I just want to say, if cremation is meaningful, then we should have that. And I think one of the things I'm up here sort of stumping for is more options so that we can choose something that's meaningful to us and our families. So I'd say that's about half the problem right there. And the other big part of the problem is that as cremation rates have risen and as religious rates of religion have fallen, and maybe for lots of other reasons, I'm not even sure, we've lost meaningful ritual around the event of death. How many of you have heard someone say, "When I die, don't make a fuss"? Like, just like, don't have a funeral, don't cremate me, or just cremate me, don't have a funeral. And I would argue that when someone dies, it is like the best time to make a fuss. Like, it's a big deal, you know? An interjection, kind of going back to the last slide, one thing I neglected to mention is the rise in natural burials. And we can talk about that a little bit later. Natural burial is rising all over the US. It's a beautiful option where bodies are typically wrapped in a shroud and buried directly in the ground, sometimes paired with conservation land. And it often brings with it more meaningful ritual for families because they participate in the work of burying their loved one. When I was in grad school several years ago, I was enamored by natural burial, as I imagine many of you are. But I realized that it probably wasn't a solution for all of our urban dead, because natural burial, as beautiful as it is, still relies on a place where the body is buried, and then typically that's all you do with that piece of land. I mean, it stewards the earth in a wonderful way, but typically you don't bury another person there, so there's a land use question. Our solution to all of this is very similar to natural burial. We rely on, well, we don't even rely on, we look to nature. All of you know this. What happens on the forest floor is perfection. As organic material dies and decomposes and creates new life, becomes the basis for all of new life. When I was thinking hard about the problem of cremation and conventional burial, wondering what kind of space and perhaps system I could contribute to the world to alleviate these problems, a friend of mine called me on the phone and she told me about these farmers and agricultural institutions and researchers that had been composting whole cows for decades. That was my light bulb moment. I thought, certainly if you can compost a whole cow, you can compost a human. that was sort of like, really, it was a watershed moment for me. And from then on, I've been working on a system that would transform human bodies into soil that we could then use to grow a tree, nourish a garden, give back to the land. So we call this process recomposition, as in to recompose, as in music, or as in a body to soil. And it starts with creating the perfect environment for nature to do its job. And again, we're talking about doing this in cities. So take for a moment your concept of natural burial and bring it inside a building, inside a conditioned space, and accelerate that process. And then you have recomposition. So what we have is a blend of wood chips, straw, and alfalfa. And this creates the perfect environment for microbes and beneficial bacteria to begin to break the body down into its natural elements. The body is laid into a recomposition vessel on a bed of this material. By the way, I know from personal experience that that material put together smells like a fresh grown meadow or fresh mown meadow. It's grown and then it's mown. It's really lovely. So we lay the body on top of a bed of that material and cover it with more of the same. We aerate this vessel. So this is an aerated system. Microbial activity happens. It's not anaerobic, so there's no methane production. Put that on the side there for you. And then in about 30 days, all that remains is soil that we can then give back to friends and family. Wow. 30 days is pretty quick. This includes bones and teeth, by the way. Includes what? Bones and teeth. So there's no skeleton at the end of that time. So the vessel system is actually used on some farms and in agricultural settings where they have like enough animal mortalities that they want to have a system that is this accelerated. Most of the time, farmers just create a space on their land where they can lay a bed of wood chips, put down the deceased horse, for example, and more wood chips over top. And left alone with nature to do its work with breezes providing oxygen and moisture provided by rain, that can take 6 to 9 months for everything but the biggest bones to break down. But because we've really controlled the environment, it's a very accelerated process. So these microbes, by the way, are around us all the time. We don't inoculate this vessel with anything in particular. We rely on the microbes that are on the wood chips, on the body, in the air around us. And I don't think I'll ever stop being blown away, no matter how many times I do this, by the fact that the material, so we start with material that's around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and in about 2 days, time and time again, we see temperatures at 150, 160 degrees Fahrenheit. These are high heat acting microbes, and they are part of why the speed happens. And they're also, I had once someone say to me, that temperature threshold, it must mean something beyond science happening. That temperature threshold, like maybe it's the moment that the soul leaves the body. And I thought, yeah, that sounds right, because there's something quite magical about that rise in temperature over just a few days, and then this incredible activity that happens to break us down and turn us back into soil. So I can geek out about this. I'm so not a scientist if it's not perfectly clear, by the way. I work with amazing scientists. I geek out about these microbes. I could talk about this for a lot longer, but I want to say that recomposition or Recompose's mission is not simply to convert human bodies into soil. It's also to bring back or create meaningful ritual where we think it's needed. And so when we talk about those vessels, this is an artist's vision. This is an artist's version of a future Recompose facility where friends and family will come and visit, where loved ones participate in the care, in the washing, in the preparing of a body before it is laid onto those natural materials, before it's laid into the vessel. All of that is what we're trying to achieve with Recompose. And in a lot of ways, when we talk about ritual, it's a really laden term. I used to have a hard time even just getting it out of my mouth, but I think what it comes down to in a lot of ways is we want family and friends to be able to do the work of caring for the dead. And we think in that work of washing and shrouding and lifting and shoveling wood chips, all of that work is part of the ritual. And that's been taken from us by the funeral industry over the past 150 years, and also a little bit because culturally we've let it happen. But there's this sort of movement to bring that back. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the others doing that work, because it's certainly not just us. But we're really aiming for participation and for a more conscious experience around this. Similar to the cremation, can everyone still hear me back there when I'm looking up? Okay. Similar to the cremation, don't make a fuss kind of comment, I've had a lot of people say to me, I want to be recomposed and turned into soil, but I don't want my family taking care of my body. Is anyone out there thinking that right now? You don't have to say yes, but I've heard it before. And for a long time, I thought, maybe this isn't very smart of me to try to do both things. Maybe they are separate things. Maybe we should be focusing on the technical system and not worry about trying to create a different kind of experience for families. And then if you'll permit me for a minute to kind of hop off track, I was recently given by my children and my mother-in-law the gift of understanding why these two things belong together. My mother-in-law, Elaine, was very sick for about 6 years, and in November she called us to Taos, New Mexico, where she lived, and to say goodbye and have one last family gathering. And I have 2 small children, both boys. I'm raising 2 young white men, and they're 10 and 13. And they love their grandmother, of course, and they knew she was sick. So we went down to visit her, and she was bedridden at that point, very open about dying. She'd already ordered her wicker casket, which was outside in the gazebo, and so it was really nice. I helped her order it, actually, because I have connections. So, but it's really handy sometimes. But hold on one sec. So she was in bed, and my kids went to her and sort of lay with her for several hours at a time, a couple of different times, mostly asking her what she thought death would be like. Was she afraid? And that they'd miss her and they would cry together. And they did this, kind of a lot of times, and I thought, she really has some patience here. I wonder if she's sick of talking about this yet, but no, she was really happy to listen to them and give her honest opinion, which is mostly, she didn't know what it would be like, but she had some thoughts, and here they were. The next day she lay in her wicker casket and asked all of us to come and kneel down to her and give her say something to her to take with. So she was that kind of person, very open and approaching the end of life with such just beauty. So I saw her give my children this gift, and then we left after saying a very tearful goodbye. And she died a week later, and we went right back. And her body was in the casket again, but of course, she was dead, you could tell. There's no one who doesn't, there's no question. And my kids, these boys, went right to her, and they held her body. They weren't afraid in the least. They knew what to expect, because they talked about it ad nauseum. And they just held her. So I know, and I can't articulate exactly what it is what exactly that gift is. I think it has to do with empathy and them having more of it and compassion, obviously. But Elaine gave them that, and she gave it to us as well. And I realized we all have that to give. Like, no matter who you are, you can give that at the end of your life to someone or to many people. So that is my very long and tearful way of saying that I know that this piece of it is crucial. So sometimes I think we're going to hook people into having a meaningful death care experience by promising them and also doing it, turning their bodies into soil. So thank you for listening to that. This next slide is probably not necessary about what I just said, but I think a lot about how to convince people to give their families the experience of caring for their bodies. Because I understand that not a lot of us think about that and say, I don't know if that's what I actually want. It won't be required. But the basic concept of our facility, for lack of a better word, of Recompose Seattle, is that no matter what you feel comfortable in taking part in as friends and family, our staff is going to care for the body along the way. That will include washing and shrouding and the laying into the vessel. And so we want to encourage friends and family to participate wherever they feel they can along that path. And with zero judgment if you don't do it at all, but knowing that the person that's died has given you this opportunity. And so we think of, a lot of times we think of being a little bit the antidote to today's funeral homes, which by and large don't give this experience or don't make it very easy to have. I think it's worth saying too that we also really want to support this good stuff that's already happening in the world of alternative death care and palliative care and sort of the continuum of life and death. And so, however, we haven't really figured out how to do this, but like how we can support specifically the people that want to have the home funeral and then come to Recompose Seattle. Figuring out how we can be stewards of that experience as well, and that continuum is really important to us. I like to be really specific because, so our vision is to be the antidote of the funeral home. But what that also includes is taking a lot of, if not all of, the tasks of today's funeral home on. So our service will include transportation of the body. The moment begins when the body is picked up. We have a lot of ideas of how that moment can be a special one and not a scary one for folks when our staff come to the hospital or the hospice or the home and take the body. A lot of it, again, has to do with allowing family and friends to participate in that work if they want to. It's really important to me, and I know part of it's because I have this design background, but to create a beautiful space for family and friends to gather. An intimate space, but a place that reminds us that we're all part of this ongoing cycle of nature. So time and thinking about how to give family and friends enough time without feeling rushed is another big thing I'm always thinking about. The gentle conversion of human to soil is obviously at the heart of what we do. And then we assume many will want to take some of that soil, if not all of it, and I'll get to numbers in a minute, but and go grow a tree or nourish a garden, bring it out to their favorite conservation land. And one of the things that's interesting is we have a bill coming up, and I'll go into a little more detail about the policy piece, but right now it looks like the soil will be regulated like ashes. So you can basically, as long as you have permission from the person who owns the land, you can do basically anything with that soil that you want to, just like ashes. And then I've had a number of people ask, what about additional soil that families don't want, or if they feel like it's a little bit too much of a burden to do something meaningful with that soil. And so we've started relationships with organizations like Forterra, environmental organizations specifically in the Puget Sound region that have conservation land, so that any soil that a family feels like, oh, that's actually too much for me to deal with, will go to that place. And then the goal is to be able to then say, oh, my person died November 2021, and be able to look back and know what beautiful piece of land on the Puget Sound that went to. So to kind of connect us to the land even more that way. And then I'm asked a lot about cost, and so I actually have a slide to talk a little bit about cost. And I just want to preface it by saying this is still sort of a moving target because we're still clearly figuring everything out. But our goal is really to be as affordable as possible, with at the same time creating a sustainable organization that will last and hopefully grow and be able to be in more places than just Seattle. So to give you a little bit of context, and again, that last number is a moving target, but conventional burial can run anywhere from $8,000 all the way to $25,000. I think you could probably get higher than that, actually. But in New York City, there are no plots really to buy, so it doesn't even matter how much money you have. But that's sort of the upper echelon of cost. We see cremations running anywhere from $700 for the direct cremation, up to about $7,000 or $8,000 when it includes a funeral, an urn, etc., depending on how you decide to celebrate that as part of that cremation. And then I don't actually know what Moles charges, but that would be it. But I know that natural burial in Washington State runs from anywhere from $2,000 to about $8,000, depending. And so recomposition, right now we're looking at about $5,000 for the service that includes everything that we had in the page before. And one of the things I'm pushing against, and this is sort of a social experiment, I guess, is not having that direct recomposition option. So we have my goal is to have one number that is that service for everyone, and if your family only wants to participate here, here, and here, our staff will care for that body ourselves. Part of the reason to do that is to remove any guilt or judgment that people may have. They should get the most expensive one. They don't, but they actually don't want it, or, so to come up with a number that can, we hope, give a meaningful ritual and satisfy everyone. That's never going to happen. We'll never satisfy everyone. So this slide has a little bit about sort of the environmental benefits of recomposition. Some of the obvious ones are our waste product is soil, usable soil. People ask if it's especially nutrient rich. It's not especially nutrient rich. It's fine. it's pretty nice. What I can tell you is that it is not harmful. And I can tell you that because we recently finished our pilot program at Washington State University with the soil science department as research stewards. We recomposed 6 human donor subjects, many of whom I'd met before they died, which was a real honor for me. And we proved first and foremost that yes, indeed, if you can compost a cow, you can compost a human. We also showed the reduction in harmful pathogens, or the destruction, I should say, of harmful pathogens that occurs because of those high heat, high temperatures I was describing before. And then because we're human, we also looked at heavy metal accumulation and the question of pharmaceuticals, because these are some of the questions that come up again and again. And what we found is for heavy metals, we tested mercury, copper, lead, and a couple of others that I can't remember. And all of those, I mean, why would we have heavy metals in our body? Well, I think we accumulate them over time. Also, our fillings, some of us have metal fillings with mercury in them. And we found all of those came way below the level of that the EPA requires for usable compost and soil. So we also looked at pharmaceuticals, and we're really pleased because there is some data out there, research out there from livestock composting suggesting that pharmaceuticals would break down, but a lot of it has to do with pharmaceuticals that animals are given, and mostly antibiotics. And we were able to show a 95% reduction in the pharmaceuticals that we tracked, which is, like I said earlier to Marie, not going to solve the problem of pharmaceuticals in the waterways. That's a huge problem that's happening all over the world that has to do with using the restroom, actually. But we're certainly not adding to the harm at all. So we're really pleased by those results. Because our goal, again, is to be able to give this soil back to friends and family and have it be used to grow a tree and nourish a garden. And so we really were pleased to be able to check off those 3 boxes and prove its safety. You know, all of those numbers I stated in the first slide, we can avoid the pollution caused by conventional burial and cremation. And we had a life cycle assessment run to show the overall savings, specifically of carbon dioxide. And they calculated over a metric ton per person. A lot of that has to do with the sequestration of carbon, not just the avoidance of it. But that's a pretty great number. I think they give out like dollars. The state gives out dollars for metric ton savings. So yeah, so that's a pretty great thing. And then for me, honestly, the environmental benefit is a little bit more nuanced in that I think reminding us that we return to the earth, reminding us that every day we walk around alive, we're part of the natural cycle, hopefully showing that to people again and again through the death of their loved ones, that may have impacts that we can't quantify, but I think can be really powerful. So for me, that returning to the earth is actually one of the biggest impacts that we have environmentally. So I'm kind of getting towards the end of the talk. I hope there's lots of questions, but I want to make sure I touch on some of the things we've done since we started our research and development in 2014. Back in 2015, we did an early proof of concept where we recomposed 6 humans, both times 6, which is confusing, but this was at Western Carolina University with the Forensic Anthropology Department. And the model I described to you, which was wood chips, body wood chips, was the type of system we used at Western Carolina. And that was just really to say, to sort of, it was a great kickoff for the research. The Forensic Anthropology Department are experts in decomposing humans, and they were really excited to see this new form of decomposition occur. That was the first time that I had the experience of taking a temperature probe and putting it into that mound of wood chips and seeing the dial spin up to 150 degrees on day 2 in the winter in North Carolina. I was like really blown away. So like I said, we have a life cycle assessment, which is lots of spreadsheets detailing the actual environmental benefits of recomposition. If anyone wants to see that, I'm happy to share it. I can't even really quite understand it, but some people really like that. We have a patent filed around this system. We have collaborated with many amazing organizations and people. That's why we've gotten this far, and completed a lot of the engineering and prototyping. And then, like I said before, we just finished the pilot program with Washington State University, which, by the way, was a real exercise in patience and understanding university systems. I'm pretty sure we hold the record for the number of new committees formed to decide whether or not our research should move forward. But I'm told that having run that gauntlet is good news for us going forward because we did it. And it was actually a real joy working with the researchers, the faculty, and staff on that project. So, what do you think, Marie?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm ready. Good.
Good. We are working on so many things right now, but things have really ramped up since we began this work. And I meant to say earlier, so some of you might have seen the TED Talk I gave about this concept, or just looked at some press from earlier a couple of years ago. We were working on a collective vertical core system. Okay, I should have started with that probably. You've all seen that. And about a year and a half ago, my team of designers, and mostly it was sort of the design side team, we looked at that. I was looking at the timeline, which was not this rosy. And we were considering, how can we make this happen faster? How can we prototype and legalize and finish the engineering of that collective vertical core system? And so we thought, well, maybe the best thing would be to focus for legalization on a vessel system, because they already exist on farms, and we could design one that works for humans, better for humans, in terms of ritual and experience. And once we'd kind of made that sort of pivot, it was obvious that that was the place to start. So for now, we've put the collective vertical core with its beautiful journey to the top, with all of the ritual that I had to kind of grieve letting go. We've put it aside, and we're focusing on the hive system of individual vessels. So this year, which is almost over, we've finished the pilot project, or pilot study, and we've completed the manufacture of a prototype. So one of those vessels is now we're just about to start testing with it. And the kind of thing we're testing are the ancillary systems, the control systems, making sure it does what we want to do before we design an entire hive, like you saw in that rendering. In January of next year, so in just about a month and a half, we are bringing a bill to the Washington State Legislature that will legalize recomposition. The definition legally is the contained, accelerated conversion of human remains to soil. Like I said previously, the soil will likely be regulated like ashes from cremation, which means you can spread it anywhere you have permission from the landowner, or I guess, yeah, landowner. And we have a sponsor down in Seattle, Jamie Peterson, Senator Jamie Peterson. And so far we've been going all over the state talking to legislators, most of whom see this as a practical, obviously environmental option in a state that has a growing elder population and should have more options for consumers. So we're having really great responses, and feel pretty optimistic about the January through April session. So aside from legalization, we'll be doing all the design work for a facility in Seattle. Right now we're calling it Recompose Seattle. And it won't look identical to the picture you saw, but the goal is to have gardens on site, natural light, a feeling of spaciousness, intimacy, somewhere you want to be. We want to have community concerts and talks and events, so death cafes, concerts, just to bring people in when a death hasn't occurred yet necessarily, and make them think, oh, this might be a place I'd be comfortable. I might want to talk to my family about my wishes, etc. So really kind of making it be a community space. That is an absurd timeline. So this is like if everything goes perfect. perfectly, we could potentially be opening Recompose Seattle in 2020. Permitting, land use, all the questions. It's a building type that hasn't been built before, so we're actually starting conversations now with the experts in land use. What is this type of building? Well, it's a funeral home, but it's also kind of like a crematory, but with a different process inside. So those are the kind of conversations that are pretty interesting, but happening now. And then our goal once we open is to just continue to get it right. We have all these ideas of how our staff can be, you know, the antidote to so many people's experiences from day one. And we know that we probably won't be perfect from day one. And so it's all going to be about iterating and making things better and continuing to improve. So I never know where to put this slide because these are the people that have made this happen. I get to go around and speak to everyone, but our team is really deeply committed to this work, and also they are the experts in this field. So just for example, Lynn Carpenter-Boggs is the faculty member who spearheaded the research at WSU. She's a PhD in soil science. She's been composting livestock for 20 years. She knows everything about those microbes. She's never surprised when she sees the temperatures. And so she's a great example of the kind of team we have put together. And honestly, the team kind of continues to expand in this incredible way. And part of how I find people who are aligned is by going and speaking. So it's a beautiful cycle. And then I've alluded to this, or maybe I mentioned it, but there is already this wave of alternative death care goodness happening all over the world, especially all over the US, because we have things even a little more effed up than the rest of the world does. And this has been happening for decades now. These are organizations that are working everywhere from palliative care, death with dignity laws, to consumer rights around funerals, because you need them, to Resting Waters does aquamation for pets. It's all part of the same beautiful system, and I mean, it's an incredible group of people and organizations. And then I put these two down here because these are two fellowships that I was able to get from organizations that have nothing to do with death care, but that see that it really matters, and that suddenly death and dying, I mean, do you all see this? Suddenly it's like percolating. It's like the New York Times has a little page, or a whole page about the end, and it's a really wonderful time to be doing this work. So I'm so grateful. There's many more to this page, really, but it's an amazing group of people and orgs. And I was just going to say one more thing. Oh yes, I forgot to mention that our policy work is actually a pairing of two new options. So we're not just legalizing recomposition, we're also legalizing aquamation here in Washington State. So if that bill goes through, we will be by far the most progressive state in the country when it comes to death care, I would argue. Yay! Sorry, aquamation, also known as alkaline hydrolysis, is another option of death care that's legal in 16 states. Maybe it's 18 now. It is developed by the Mayo Clinic, I think, quite a long time ago. It's used, it's essentially a large canister. The body is put inside, and the canister is filled with warm water and high alkaline solution. And then, so the flesh dissolves and the bones get brittle. And then the bones are crushed up and given back to families. That's alkaline hydrolysis. And I want to just mention, in case folks in the room didn't know, cremation, while that might sound kind of odd, you should all know, if you don't already, that cremation ashes are actually crushed bone as well. So lots of people think of them as ashes, but they're actually, the bones are brittle at the end and put through what's called a cremulator and then handed back to families. So it's kind of interesting. So alkaline hydrolysis and cremation, you both get back, both return kind of a crushed bone to the family. That was a weird place to end, huh? But that was the end. Oh man, yeah, thank you.
Do you know yet what the bill number will be so that we can exert our own influence with our legislators?
I'll repeat the question. What's the bill number and can you influence your legislators? And I think we get a bill number in December. And please, if you haven't yet, go to our website and sign up for the grassroots team. It will also sign you up for our newsletter. So it's just, all you have to do is scroll to the bottom, click on Washington State Grassroots, and sign up. And if you don't know your district number, just leave it blank. And then if we have like moments where we need people to prod, we will let you know. Yeah. Yeah?
So after 30 days,
Yes.
how much soil are you?
Thank you for asking that. After 30 days, because we start with so much additional material besides the body, we are about a cubic yard. Yeah, that's like one of those chairs, kind of. And so that's part of the reason that we want to make sure that families don't feel like they have to take all of it. If you live in Bellingham, you might have a big garden and want all of it, but if you don't, you might just want a little bit. Maybe you just want some in a locket, who knows. But so we'll have the opportunity to be able to use that on land that needs it. Yeah?
So how do you guys plan to cater to people who may already have burial rituals and traditions? I'm thinking like, I come from the Jewish faith and I kind of explained to my mom that I'm more interested in alternative methods, and she's like, you're gonna have a Jewish funeral, and I'm just like, okay. So it's like,
Well,
would you be comfortable like having like a rabbi or like catering to just like stuff like that within that process?
yeah, I mean, we absolutely, I've talked to a number of rabbis. Some of them are like this, I think it really depends on the congregation. So some rabbis are like, this would work great for my congregation, but some are like, no, it's not quite there. But really when I talk about giving time in the place, in the space, that could look like anything families want it to. And sometimes we think about having even as simple as like a place on the wall where you might hang whatever religious like symbol you want. But beyond that, it's really about families making that happen. So I mean, it really depends, but absolutely our goal is to make it as possible as we can, because I think when I say ritual, it's like, it's a framework for ritual. It's so if you don't do anything but the work that I described, we hope that's meaningful. If you want to layer on music and religion, and that is wonderful. But there's so many who don't have like for me, I would say my family never went to church. We don't have a thing. So there's to be given a little bit of like framework is the key, or is the goal. Yeah.
I have 3 questions.
Okay.
We'll see if you have time. I'm curious, I had the privilege of offering memorial services for a lot of people when I worked with hospice, and one of the things that people really loved were being able to scatter the ashes of their loved ones in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering whether that's part of what would be allowed in Washington and how that would work.
The question was about scattering the soil in the water, and I think, I believe you can scatter ashes in any navigable waterway, so this would be the same.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious about what vessel was used in the pilot, since you were, you're creating it now.
Yeah. The vessel was a cylindrical, actually a 66-foot vessel that we divided into 10-foot sections. It was already on the campus and was available for use. So it was an amazing moment of like, oh my gosh. And it was made, it was typically used on farms.
Right. And so the reason that the farm animals take a month, is that what you said?
No, it just depends on the system.
So I'm curious about why it's so much shorter with your system. vessel, which makes for the temperature to be able to be higher, or?
Yeah. Yeah, we can contain the heat, and we also we aerate and add material at a couple of different points in order to keep the temperatures high. So I think well, actually, this is totally a guess, but I would venture to say many farms have pretty passive systems where they're not worried. Why would they care about time? I particularly love the amount of that 1 month to come back. So I really want that so we're really aiming for that 1 month. It's also, when you think about, we can only serve so many people with so many vessels. So if we can get it just a little faster, we can serve more people. So it is a little bit of that as well. Yeah?
What about titanium joints?
Oh yeah. Titanium joints and golden teeth will be screened out before given to families, and that will be recycled. So after the material is finished, but before we give it back to families. Yeah? Way in the back?
You mentioned that the soil could be put anywhere where the owner of the property approves. What about public lands, parks, forests?
Yeah, I don't know about public lands. I should know that. I don't remember what you can do with ashes on public lands. I probably shouldn't say this while being recorded, but it's a misdemeanor to put ashes in the wrong place. And I don't know. I mean, you're not supposed to put ashes at Disneyland, I know that, but everybody does. So, yeah.
I have a question and a comment. The question is, on the legal front, either historically or if you know of any thing that may be happening related to this, I'm wondering if there's any movement to look at making just backyard burial legal. We permit for everything under the sun. We permit for other things that are related to health issues, in particular, say a septic tank, or certainly the building process, like you are undergoing in your process, what kind of activity is going to happen on land. So I'm wondering if you know of any movement to do that. I know that's not part of your organization and part of what you're doing, but it seems like it's yet another alternative that could be a possibility for get a permit to go 6 feet under and do it in your own backyard. So I'll let you answer that before my comment.
Okay, the question was about backyard burials. Okay, and if someone else knows better than this, I'm going to give it a stab, but I'm pretty sure in Washington State, you can, if you apply and become a cemetery for $25,000, you can usually do that if you own a piece of land. But that's a lot of money that many people don't have or decide it's not worth it.
And it has to permanently remain thus.
And it has to permanently remain a cemetery, thank you. In some states, you can bury in your backyard as long as you put it on the title of the house, so it's known going forward, or the deed. And in some states, it's just not legal, I think. I think probably New York, New Jersey.
It's legal in some places in New York.
Okay, forget that. Forget what I said about New York and New Jersey. And then, and it's often by township, I think, but a lot of times, like, all the towns in the state will follow. But, possibly more realistic would be starting a movement, if anyone wants to do this, to do the above ground recomposition, like in a mulch pile, basically, wood chips, like farmers do, because then there's not a burial. Burials and cemeteries are very highly regulated. One of the first things we want to make sure people like at the city know is we are not a cemetery. Because they're...
Too many raccoons, it won't work.
Yeah.
So the comment is related to your pricing.
Oh yeah.
And what you're attempting to do, it's fabulous. I mean, it's wonderful. I love it. My concern is there's just a lot of folks who wouldn't be able to afford that.
Right.
And I know the budget and the costing is a huge challenge in any new business, let alone something that's like a new business
Yeah.
like this, and all the research and work that's going into this. I just encourage you to think about having some sort of a competitive price for that $750 cremation, because you're going to attract a lot more people and get much more momentum, I think, if you were to be able to offer that to more of a wide audience, so to speak.
So the comment was about pricing, and how that price that I said, 5,000, would obviously preclude some, or I don't know if that's the right word, prohibit some people from being able to afford it. And then that was the first part of the comment, to which I'll say, and I should have put it on the slide, but this will not solve that, but we have built into our business model a community fund, asset-based community fund for folks who can't afford it, and over time building on that, having, for example, some of the community events, any kind of ancillary revenue-based activities, funding that, and then also appealing to people when they've had an experience that was incredibly beautiful and meaningful in that space, and they have the means to donate to it. So we have that planned. It's, again, it won't solve for everyone who can't afford it, but we hope that will be a start. The question about having a sort of $700 tier price is sort of a slightly different question or comment, and I'm just so worried that everyone will choose it and no one will go for a ritual. And plus, we couldn't make it work at $750, period. But I thought about it long and hard. Like, do I want to make a factory, have it out somewhere, doesn't matter where, become the Amazon of death? And I was like, I do not want to do that. I just don't want to do that. And so it would have to be so, it's like the minute we started looking at really having a really pared down version, it started to make me nervous about that. So we're, at least for the beginning, we're going to really push ritual, push participation, push some time in the space, and we'll see what happens. But I've made changes before, so yeah.
I may have missed it. Folded prion disease and safety.
Oh yeah, so prions, great question. There is some research showing that they may be broken down by the process, but we haven't proven it yet. So we would actually say that's not, if you died of a known prion disease, that would actually not be a good fit for you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you.
Yes?
I think this sounds like a fascinating and wonderful plan, so thank you for the part that you've done so far. But I want to say that the whole idea of composting a human body really immediately brought up to me what I know in permaculture of hot composting, which is done all the time. And I know that you have to have certain conditions to really get the internal temperature high enough and a lot of aeration, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just thinking a couple of things. One is, since you haven't built the actual place yet, and you're trying to have a controlled environment, presumably each of the pods would have an internal temperature fairly high, or it might give off heat. So if you had many of them, what would you do to keep it cooler, or could you capture that heat to either help, as an architect, to help the whole building become more self-sufficient, or maybe even use that heat for something else? So that was one idea. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, we've thought about the heat. There'll be a lot of heat created by this vessel. Some of it will support its neighbor, so that's great because we'll be starting at temperatures right around that vessel that are already quite warm. What was I going to say? I also have this vision. We'll certainly heat the place in the winter, but I think it would be really cool to have like artists come through, maybe like a annual artist fellowship where they sit here. You can use this waste heat somehow make something that uses that heat. I think that would be really interesting.
Because you said there's no methane really that's produced.
No.
Because I've just seen buildings like at Oberlin College where the whole structure is done by actually composting toilets to help renew all sorts of systems, and it's really cool. The second thing I thought was, have you thought about if someone isn't from Washington State and is interested if this gets up and running, wants to come in and do it, what are the legal or the other kind of
Yeah.
state or burial?
I have thought about that because I thought, for example, we have a really great, I have a friend who's a funeral director in New York City, and she's like, I might have some people that want to be recomposed. Now, New York has pretty onerous state rules in terms of funeral stuff, so we're not going to go there right away as our next state. California, Colorado would be much more likely as next states, just FYI. So I looked up what kind of a carbon footprint a flight would be compared to the savings. It's only a quarter of that metric ton. So that was cool. So I was like, okay, so you could be flown from New York. If you were like, I'm just geeking out about this is what I want, you could be flown by our partner in funeral home in New York to Seattle. We would pick you up at the airport. You know, bodies fly all over the place all the time. Because people never die when where they're supposed to. Not never, but. So we could accept a body and presumably send them back to the soil. But yeah.
Up until your timeline slide, I wasn't confused. I understood your mission of creating the technology and the legal foundation for a new method of body disposition. But then the slides seem to indicate that this was now a startup enterprise. Okay, you were actually going to, shouldn't you separate the two from developing as an alternative as opposed to actually operating an enterprise that offers that service?
I don't know. Well, so the question was, is this, are we developing a new option or are we operating facilities?
Yes.
I think
It sounded like both.
we're going to do both.
Oh, okay.
Because, and it goes back to the same thing, which is like, I love developing this. I love the technical aspects of it. But creating places, I think we can make a tremendous difference to the way we culturally experience death by creating these places that don't exist today. Now, we will also, for certain funeral homes that are aligned, that want to license this system, we may look at that kind of relationship as well, because what we want to do next is then make sure that we can be available for whoever wants it. And one of the kind of quickest ways to do that is to partner where there's already the infrastructure of a funeral home, licensed funeral directors, just all of the parts and pieces. So we are looking at licensing. We have interest. I'm actually working with a Brazilian funeral home right now, which is really interested in kind of helping us beta the licensing structure. And then there's folks all over the world where it'd be much easier for them to license and for us to go there. But I think that, but yeah, I mean, the place is really important, and I get really excited about kind of what's driven me is to create that place. So for what it's worth, my passion has been fueled by that, by getting there. Does that answer your question?
Oh, so I guess I still don't entirely understand why you want to preserve your intellectual property as opposed to giving it away.
Oh, that's a different question.
Okay.
Why I want to preserve intellectual property as opposed to giving it away. Well, there's a lot of opportunity.
Preserve intellectual property, what?
Instead of giving it away. Well, I think, I was working on this a few years ago early on, and my dad, who has been a super fan from the beginning, I was like, and then we'll open source. And he was like, so let's just think about what could go wrong if we open source. I think there's some benefit to having some, I'm going to say control, but I mean it in a way that it's like training and technical support control might make sense. But also, the reality is
you have to have some control over the branding, or I guess the making sure only people who follow the actual thing can call themselves, you know, a recompost or a recomposer or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Are you asking sort of like more philosophically?
More in a sense that the reason the web and things took off is because Tim Berners-Lee didn't start Google. Okay.
Okay, gotcha. So we're talking about, yeah, spreading something faster if you just give it away. I mean, actually, I do think so. In a lot of ways, so we're legalizing this process. We're not just legalizing this process in Recompose facilities. The process of converting human remains to soil is going to be legal. That's for whoever it is. They can either come to us and say, "Hey, you seem to have kind of figured out the technical stuff." Then we can help them do that, or they can be like, "Well, let's figure out the technical stuff." So I think in a way it is hopefully just opening up the opportunity for folks to do it. And then we also plan to have toolkits open source to get to the place where so it doesn't matter if Austin, Texas is like, we want this now, because it's not legal in Texas. And it's taken me years to get to where we're about to be legal in Washington. And so like, there's actually a lot of work that has to happen before a state can be ready. So what we are trying to do is create these toolkits for folks to get ready as fast as possible, because it's kind of a long game. Yeah, I hope that somewhat answered your question. Yeah.
Is that me?
Yes.
Okay, I have a lot of questions. I'll try to be brief, but I'll start with something humorous. I've already done a lot of research as to what to do with my own body, and I've actually found a way to be buried whole at sea legally. So I'm very excited about that. But now you've got me intrigued with an alternative. So, and another humorous aside, are you selling stock?
Not right now, but I'm not sure if I mentioned we were a nonprofit from 2014 to 2017. And then last year in 2017, I started a public benefit corporation, which is like a B Corp, which is Recompose. And we've gotten all of what we got done in the last year and a half done with heart-aligned investment money. I'm going to make a quick side pitch that my goal is to do this all with a non-VC model, because I don't believe a venture capital model, non-venture capital model, because I believe we're turning away from that anyway. So yeah, so we have done what we've done in the past year and a half by the investments of heart-aligned people.
Right. You have to eat.
And I have to eat.
Right. So I have a couple other similar line questions. What's going to cost you to build your facility?
We're still figuring out the budget for that. We've been really blessed to work with Olson Kundig, which is an architecture firm in Seattle, and they're doing conceptual design for us pro bono, because they're awesome, but they also think this project has merit. So we're still working on the details. Yeah.
Did you, are you getting any pushback from the deaf industry?
Every time I'm asked that question, I'm like noticing the camera. No, not yet. We're too weird and niche. No, I think the thing about the funeral industry is, while it's gotten us to a really bad place culturally, it's made up of people that actually want to support families. So there's like this structure that's been created of the funeral industry which doesn't really benefit anyone. The rise in cremation has not been good for funeral homes for the most part. And I think many funeral directors that have been around kind of know that there's a shakeup coming. And like I said before, we hope to be able to partner with funeral homes. So we haven't had pushback. I mean, there's people who say like, oh, that's not dignified. But I don't think they mean it. So, it's like, what is dignified? So,
Well, my
yeah.
last question is, what's the status of your patent?
It's pending.
And it's a concept, or a, what do you call it? There's two different words for kinds of patents.
Like a method or a system, is that right?
There's utility patent and there's a concept patent. I think that's it. Anybody knows what they're talking about?
Maybe we'll talk after about the patents. Yeah, and I can dredge something better up than that, but it's pending. Yeah, we actually have 2 different ones pending. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the association with the People's Memorial Association?
Oh, yeah. Do you know them?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
And if you're a member, how that works, and also like the logistics of if you're in Bellingham and you want to do this, and that.
The question was about People's Memorial Association. If you're a member of that excellent organization in Seattle, how does it work? And what happens if you're in Bellingham and you die and you want to come down to Seattle? So People's Memorial is a co-op funeral home with 65,000 living members in the state of Washington. And it's a one-time membership fee of like $50 or something like that, once. And it gets you then pricing at all of their member funeral homes. And there's member funeral homes all over the state. So they also do a lot of advocacy and work around getting people talking about death care, et cetera. So we've been working with them for years. Nora Menken is she's the managing director of that funeral home and is a really important advisor of mine. And we don't have the numbers worked out, but we expect that we'll be one of their partner funeral homes. And so there'll be a discount for People's Memorial members to be recomposed. In terms of being in Bellingham, you could have your family drive down. You could hire, or I don't know what kind of distance our own transporters will go, but it's always possible to have a funeral home, here take you to there. So it's doable.
And what's the time, like, if you're not doing embalming and all that stuff?
Oh, so if someone dies and,
Uber.
Ah, yes, Uber. There you go. Oh, what's the timeline if someone dies and you're not embalming? Because obviously we don't embalm bodies. You actually cannot be recomposed if you've been embalmed. But there's a couple, certainly, as long as the body's kept cool, you have days and to weeks. So yeah, there's time. Plenty of time. Yes?
Have you considered engaging in pre-sales?
Yeah, the question was about pre-sales. That would be great if we could do that. There's a couple of reasons why we're not going to yet. One is that my legal counsel told me if we started to sell pre-sales of something that was illegal, it would actually be a security. So we'd be like, just not a good idea. But down the road I would like to, but as we're starting up, there's so many unknowns that to say to someone, if you give us this money now, we can be sure that in 25 years or 30 years or 40 years, we'll be able to take care of you. It's just not quite realistic yet, and so we won't start yet. I do want to just make like a pledge so people can just sign a pledge, and like getting around to having paperwork for people's families, but yeah. Yes?
What's the capacity of your initial facility and how do you, I assume you have plans to scale up. I think there'll be a huge demand.
Thank you for saying that there'll be a huge demand. Right now we're going between 750 families a year to 1,000. We're kind of, by going between, I mean trying to figure out what makes sense in terms of staffing and all that. 1,000 bodies per year is 8% of the region's dead. Is that right? That's low. Maybe just Seattle. Could that be right? It's a mid to large size funeral home would handle that many caseloads a year. So yeah, I mean we're going to respond to demand. So the question is, do we need a place in the more northern part of the state, or is it all about Seattle? And so I think we haven't quite figured that out, or I know we haven't figured that out yet. But balancing that, the cost, of course, of starting up a new place, and demand is something I think about like every night while I'm trying to sleep.
I think one more question. Katrina needs to be in Olympia tomorrow morning. So
Yeah, I'm meeting with some more senators.
It's not a question, it's just, it's a mind blow. I mean, I just think this is so wonderful.
Thank you. I saw one more question back there.
up to you.
I'll pick, because that wasn't a question. Thank you for saying it though. Yes?
These two questions, but they're quick. One, do you have a facility site in mind in Seattle yet? And the second, I'm sorry I missed the introduction, so Marie may have said this, but I'm curious about what you were getting your degree in when you got the idea for this project.
Okay, I got my degree in architecture, which has to do with spaces and systems and places. And then we haven't picked a site. We're actually figuring out the zoning question still, but you know, because we're moving so many materials like wood chips, straw, and alfalfa, like kind of large quantities, we are thinking about an industrial zone place where we have easy access. I know we can make any place beautiful inside, and so a lot of the time what I'm thinking about with sites is like, what does the approach feel like? So it can be zoned industrial, but it has to feel okay, feel good in some way.
So let's give Katrina a great
Thank you. Thank you.